This is Media Lit. I'm Kieran Outshorn, and today First Nations in Ontario, specifically from Treaty 9, are in court in the Ontario Superior Court. And they're arguing that a court case that they brought several years ago, saying that they should have co-jurisdiction and also should be awarded something like $95 billion in damages to actually have control over what type of mining happens in their territory. This is in the northern part of Ontario, Treaty 9. In what's called the Ring of Fire. They're in court today arguing that they should be able to do that. A little bit of context is that the Ring of Fire is this area where there's a lot of critical minerals. Ontario has been eyeing it for a long time, especially Doug Ford, who's the premier in this province. They've been eyeing it, saying they want to develop that. Could be a key in some of the negotiations that they've been having with the United States. Now, the First Nations, they say that this is their traditional territory. They've lived on and occupied this for a long time, that their treaty that they signed, Treaty 9, didn't say anything about them giving up those rights or giving up having consent for it. And so several years ago, they started this process saying, no, we want to participate. But development, or some first steps towards development, have continued to push forward, including some of these resource extraction companies actually starting some initial work looking to do some exploration on some of these territories. And what's happened in also along with the court case that's starting today is that one of the First Nations has actually gone out with a cease and desist letter to those companies who are doing exploration, and they've said, you need to stop what you're doing right now, and you need to wait until we can either get full consent and or the court can weigh in on this. So that's what's happening right now. You can hear the ambulance behind me there, but that's what's happening right now. If you're curious about how I was able to find all those details or understand and be able to actually give you the facts, well, what you can do is you can come to my YouTube channel where I'm going to roll back in time on this video, and I'm going to walk through step by step exactly how I learned all this stuff and how I used my media literacy to help me read the news. All right, let's get started. So jumping into the Google Doc here, we have First Nations in Northern Ontario are headed to court to force Ottawa and Queen's Park to respect Treaty 9 because governments continue to approve development in their territory, especially in the Ring of Fire, without their consent. Okay, so interesting story. I don't know what this new legal proceeding is going to entail, but basically this is a classic long-term issue that's been going on in Canada, where different governments are looking to develop resources. That's sort of foundationally what happens in Canada, and that's coming into conflict with treaty rights, with the Indigenous rights for folks on the land. And this is particularly based in Ontario, Treaty 9, and around the Ring of Fire, which is in Northern Ontario. So let's say Treaty 9. Let's just do 8. Let's do some initial understanding of what's going on here. Let's look at some images. Treaty 9 area. So we're looking at mostly, this is interesting. This is from Radio-Canada, and maybe we can zoom in a little bit. Here we are looking at basically James Bay and Lake Superior. Treaty 9 is this large slab kind of above Thunder Bay, above this lake here, and cutting down to sort of Timmins, and there's Cochrane in here. So 1905 to 1906 was, I guess, when it was signed. The Treaty 9 Land Claims Agreement in pale blue clearly begins at the boundary between the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. That would be here. And the Quebec Cree have filed a lawsuit in Ontario claiming some of that area is around. Okay, so that's from a different story, but this gives us a sense of basically where the treaty is. And that's from Radio-Canada's story. And the Ring of Fire. Where is the Ring of Fire? Oh, so I guess there's more than one thing called the Ring of Fire. So Ring of Fire is this around the Pacific Ocean, this basin. Let's say Ontario. Ring of Fire in Ontario. Okay, so again, we're looking, here's James Bay. Let's take the Ring of Fire. This is all Treaty 9, as we can see, and there are areas where there are a lot of minerals, a lot of critical minerals, and the Ontario government wants to mine them. That's sort of the foundation there. This is the area that we're looking at. Okay, so let's get started. We are looking for Treaty 9, Ring of Fire, and court. So we're going to go Treaty 9, Ring of Fire Court. Alrighty, cease and desist 8 hours ago. Cease and desist letter served to the Ring of Fire Mining. That looks interesting. Let's go to the news tab just to see what we can get here. Of course, that's the top story 8 hours ago. Cease and desist letter served to Ring of Fire Mining Company by the Neskantanega First Nation. Don't think I'm saying that right. Okay, we also got one from the Narwhal from 2 days ago. First Nations Bill 5 court case could see interveners from Attawapaskat. Canadian Climate Institute, that's June. First Nations, that's October. Okay, so most of these are all pretty old. The CBC one's pretty new. Let's say Treaty 9 and just court. Let's take out the Ring of Fire just to give us more options here. See if anyone else has come up with anything. Young people will speak in court after leaders stayed silent about Ontario Development Bill. I mean, I think this might be slightly different. Okay, let's start with the CBC one and see where we're going. This is written by Sarah Law. And we can take a look at Sarah Law. Sarah Law is a CBC News reporter based in Thunder Bay. She's also worked for newspapers and online publications elsewhere in the province. And you can reach out to her if you have tips. So she's from that sort of like just below the Treaty 9 area. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, looks like she was just the author who did this. No files from anyone else. So this is all her reporting. So we're going to go ahead and read this story. Okay, so this story is basically lining up the classic, or maybe not classic, but the well-known conflict between First Nations to say you haven't actually gotten full consent from us, and resource extraction operations that say, well, we've got all the permits that we're supposed to. We talked to the government, as well as continuing to make comments about how they value their Indigenous partners and want to build relationships with the community. So this story focuses on this band counselor, Lashada Wasa, who's quite young, 21 years old. She's the youngest band counselor. She took part in a trip to go out to some of these mining operations. They're not actually mining yet. They're basically doing some exploration. You can see it's a mining exploration camp. So they went out there, served the workers with a cease and desist letter. The goal of that was to stop them from exploration in that area. An interesting and important part of what she's saying here, she says, my grandmother's trap line is actually not too far from where that mining camp is, which is very concerning. Now, in a lot of previous cases, historically here in Canada, First Nations will rely on continued and continuous occupation and use of territory. So the fact that this exploration is happening quite near to where this woman's family has traditionally used and occupied the land actually makes her, her claim and her position quite a bit stronger. Now, there's some details here about what the Ring of Fire is. The Ring of Fire is a crescent-shaped mineral deposit in the James Bay lowlands that has been eyed by Ontario Premier Doug Ford as a critical asset in the trade war between Canada and U.S. Basically, the U.S. needs critical minerals. There's a deposit of them in this what's called the Ring of Fire, and so Ontario, and particularly Doug Ford, has been really motivated to try to develop that area. The company that's doing the exploration, they were targeting copper, nickel, platinum, gold, and cobalt in that area. And the First Nation, including the chief of that First Nation. And to be fair, sometimes there's a distinction between elected chiefs and traditional chiefs. Not clear. When they say chief here, they say according to Neskantanaga's chief, Gary Quincy's, his First Nation never consented. When they say his chief, like they're probably referring to the elected chief because that's usually the default they go to, which is a whole nother conversation we get into at some point. But he says basically they never consented to the exploration activities, which he says have escalated. This comes as there's some major developments. The provincial and federal government are expected to sign a deal to speed up more projects in the area. Okay, that's what we hear that from the Canadian press there. And then also, this actually ties in a little bit more with our actual focus statement. A hearing is scheduled in Ontario Supreme Court for a $95 billion lawsuit between 10 First Nations in Treaty 9, including the Niskantanaga. And I've clicked on that, so we're going to read that next because maybe that'll give us more. Also worth noting is the company's response. Company says, in an emailed statement that they've received all the required permits. So that's sort of classically what they say. Ontario government also got back to them, basically saying, well, we're clear. No legislation eliminates the duty to consult. We're still going to do that. It's very a nothing statement, nothing burger. They're not being particularly clear. One other fact that I thought was kind of interesting here, that's why I also highlighted it, was there was the tidbit that Neskantanaga, Nestangana. Oh man, sometimes you need to hear someone say it to get it better. But apparently they have been living under a boil water advisory for 30 years, which is the longest in effect in Canadian history, and that's obviously pretty brutal. Okay, so that's the initial setup that we get here. Let's go check out this other story. First Nation leaders. This is from Alex Brockman, April 26, 2023. I know Alex. I used to work with him in the north. He works down here in Toronto now. So this is a much older story. First Nation leaders in Treaty 9 say their message is clear: no development without us as partners. I'm going to read through this quickly. I thought this might be a little bit more of a current story, but it's clearly one that was written a few years ago. There's also a correction. A previous version of this story stated that Mark Bell is the chief of the Aroland First Nation. He is, in fact, the band counselor. Okay, cool. I'm going to do a quick read of this. So, this is, as we were saying, a story from a couple of years ago, and it's always interesting to see how long it takes these court cases to actually make their way through, to actually get somewhere. Basically, this court case basically had the plaintiffs arguing that they never gave up their rights to manage the land, and say that there needs to be a co-jurisdictional regime where the province and Ottawa cannot move forward on land development without their approval. They're seeking $95 billion in damages for Treaty 9 First Nations and injunctions to prevent both levels of government, so this is the federal and the provincial, from regulating or enforcing regulations in their treaty lands without their consents. Basically this is the First Nation saying, hey, we need to be properly consulted and need to be participating and consenting for anything to move forward. I'm going to go back to this first story where they gave the cease and desist. The hearing scheduled. So hearing scheduled in Ontario Superior Court of Justice. So I'm going to do Ontario. I want to try to find out more details about this happening right now. If this case that we've read about from several years ago is actually having a hearing this week, which is sort of what our focus statement seems to be indicating. If we go back to our focus statement, First Nations Northern Ontario are heading to court to force Ottawa and Queen's Park to respect Treaty 9 because governments continue to, do development in the Ring of Fire. So if they're going back to court this week and it's on that specific case, I would like to actually find out a little bit more. So I'm going to put in Ontario Superior Court, and I'm going to put in Treaty 9. See what comes up. Okay, so we got news. October 3rd, July 18th, July 15th. Let's go to the all category. A hearing is scheduled at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice for a $95 billion lawsuit between 10 First Nations, including Treaty 9. The provincial government's lawsuit aims. I think This is just the story we just read. Yet cease and desist. So we haven't actually gotten anything really new here. Newswire. 1 day ago, Ontario government takes several several First Nations to court to try to stop their bid for a shared decision-making authority over their homeland and treaties. This is on the heels of Bill 5 and C5 to push back reconciliation and decolonization by 40 years. This site, Cision. News provided by Woodward and Company. Not sure who that is. A wide array of domestic and global news stories, news topics, includes politics, business, entertainment, lifestyle. Okay, news from Woodward and Co. What is Woodward and Co. news? What is Woodward and Co. news? Okay. Primarily refers to developments from Woodward & Co. LLP, a Canadian law firm specializing in Indigenous rights and self-governance. Interesting. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out, because I want to read this story that we have back here on Cision, which I'm not even sure what Cision is. Contact Cision, products, about Cision Canada. About Cision? What is Cision? Yeah, okay. Finding out why hundreds of organizations are switching to Cision 1. I don't even know what that is. Some kind of website. Okay, about Cision Canada. Cision is a leading global media intelligence company, serving a complete workflow to today's communication professionals, offering the industry's most comprehensive PR and IR and social media software, rich analytics, content distribution, and influencer outreach. Cision enables clients to engage audiences and enhance campaigns to strengthen data. So I don't know. I'm worried that this is basically AI news. Now this is pretty short, so let's just read through what they have here. News is provided by Woodward and Co., which Woodward and Co., so far as we can tell, is actually a media please attend. Okay, so I should have read more into this. This is from December 17th, so that's yesterday, 2025. And this is a media release from Woodward & Co., which is the law firm that specializes in First Nations lawsuits around land claims. And this isn't really even a news article. This is a press release from that legal outfit. So I'm just going to read this quick. Okay, so good. This gave us some details. Basically, this law firm is saying a major hearing is happening on December 18th, that's today, and tomorrow in Toronto at Ontario Superior Court, and it will determine whether Ontario succeeds its efforts to crush a case brought by several First Nations who belong to Treaty 9. Now, the efforts to crush the case brought by First Nations. That's a little bit editorializing. Obviously, the lawyers in this case are making their case that this is sort of what's going on there. They say that Ontario brought a motion to strike the First Nations case. This is the one we were reading about from that Alex Brockman story, at an early stage before evidence or legal arguments can even be made. So this is like a preliminary thing. Ontario is making an argument. I don't know what their argument is at this point, but they're making an argument saying that basically this case should be thrown out and we shouldn't even engage with it before we even get to any evidence or anything else. And the lawyers here are arguing that this will have ripple effects to Indigenous rights across the country, and in particular, they say that our case that we launched 2 years ago is about Ontario trying to snuff, and that Ontario is trying to snuff out, is to show what was really agreed to in the treaty. Now, this is a classic issue here in Canada, is that the Canadian government's and the colonial states' interpretation of treaties and First Nations' understanding of treaties often don't align. And so that's sort of what's front and center here. The First Nations chief says that the archive records are clear, that the Crown never got us to agree that they could take control of all the land. In fact, the Crown never told us that that's what they intended. Canada's and Ontario's actions to take what we never agreed to give them, basically is fraud, is what he calls it. Okay, so that's what's going on. Basically, there is a court case that's been going on for a number of years that That's this one that we're reading about here, where they're wanting to have more say and also damages, $95 billion in damages. Ontario's trying to get it thrown out. This is happening at the same time as one of the First Nations who's a party to that legal thing, action, is also taking a little bit more direct action, telling the mining operations who are doing exploration work in their territory to cease and desist. And specifically, it's happening near their traditionally used territory. Of course, all of it is their traditionally used territory, but they have a specific claim with it being near their trap lines. So that's sort of what's going on with the story. Obviously, over the next 2 days, we're going to find out how the court rules. But that's where things sit. And so I think we can probably jump into a summary, if that makes sense. If you stuck all the way to the end, thank you. And yeah. This is Media Lit. I'm Kieran Outshorn, and today